Hi there, this is Ronnie Ambers now. Um, Something that got mentioned on the RPG Brigade Facebook page got me thinking, and I thought I'd throw out a video on the subject, and that is on the subject of future canon. I'll give you an example, give you a couple of examples of what I mean by future canon. The old Star Wars D6 uh, role-playing game started its timeline um, for the players. They started right after the Battle of Yavin, which is the end of the original Star Wars movie, but before the events of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Another example, a very more recent example, is the Song of Ice and Fire role-playing game, where the role-playing game is set pretty much at the start of, or just prior to the start of the first book, Game of Thrones. Here's my view. Obviously, we have seen things or read things that have happened from beyond that point. In the case of Star Wars, there are, of course, the two movies and various books that have carried on since then. In the case of Song of Ice and Fire, there is, of course, the novels or, if you want, the television show. And there are a myriad of other examples you could have where there is a case of future canon. For example, you could, if you were of a mind to, have a game that was set in Middle-earth either before the events of The Hobbit or before the events of The Lord of the Rings. Here's my view. If it hasn't happened yet, it may not happen. And I truly believe that. I am not a slave to future canon. In the case of, say, Star Wars, the actions of your player characters may well change in a small or indeed a large way. The sequence of events that happened as we saw them in The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, because of the PCs, the Battle of Hoth may not happen at all, or it may happen later than it happens in The Empire Strikes Back. In fact, it may happen before it happened in The Empire Strikes Back. It may happen sooner because of the actions of player characters. Now, certainly, if your player characters are off somewhere else and their actions do not affect the timeline directly or even indirectly, they don't affect these major incidences from something like the Star Wars movies or Song of Ice and Fire or Tolkien's works or Dragonlance or wherever you've got a semblance of future canon involved, then fine, those canon events can happen. But if your players are in a position where their actions might influence the sequence of events as written in the books or seen in the films, then as a GM, my personal opinion is that future canon is open to amendment. I do not believe that because a set of books say that A follows B to C to D to E to F, that those cannot change because they're written down. Certainly you cannot change that which is past, that which is before the timeline that you start. That makes sense. If you start a game with Star Wars, if you were to start a game immediately following Return of the Jedi, which is what I tended to do actually when I ran D6, mostly because I didn't want to fall into having to deal with future canon. You know, then you have that entire trilogy, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, are all canon. They've all happened. But you said it before. Then anything beyond the point in terms of time, beyond the point where you start, is open to amendment. It could still happen exactly as it happens in the source material. It could happen sooner, it could happen later, and it might not happen at all, due to the actions of your player characters. If they are directly involved in events which could immediately influence those canon events. Something wide-ranging like Song of Ice and Fire, I don't know how much canon you could move, but a simple thing could shape the world differently. It's true that sometimes it only takes a couple of pebbles to start an avalanche. You could make one change which ripples down the line and causes big changes elsewhere. As a GM, you have to be aware of that, and as a GM, you have to provide for that. If not, then as a GM, I don't know how you can do it. I don't know as a GM how you can set a game where there is future canon and stick rigidly to it. I don't know how you can write games that way. I don't know how you can GM games like that way. And I don't know as a player why you would want to play in those games. One of the reasons why, of all the various MMOs online, the one that gives me the least interest is Lord of the Rings Online. And it's not because I don't like the worldview, I don't like the graphics or the way the game plays. It looks beautiful, and everyone's told me it plays really well. But you're absolutely hamstrung by canon. And you cannot influence a canon. Now, as I say, if your adventure is happening to take Middle-earth, if your adventure with your player characters is happening in some small little pocket out of the way, which has got no influence whatsoever on the main thread of the Lord of the Rings, then that's fine. That thread can continue willy-nilly. But when you get to the point where your player characters have so much influence, either in that pocket, or their paths cross with the main story, that main sort of canonical story, then you have to accept that that canonical story could change. If not, why are we gaming? The whole idea that we can't change future canon doesn't sit with me. It is the future. It has not been written. I don't care if it's been written. If your players are there and you have a direct or sometimes an indirect influence on what happens in the canonical structure of a series of films, TV show, books, whatever, then you must be able to change the course. I'll give another example. The Buffy role-playing game is set after the events of season 5, which, for all people who watch the show, And, you know, spoiler alert for this, Buffy dies at the end of season 5. Obviously, she's brought back for season 6, but Buffy dies at the end of season 5. And this brings the idea, well, what do you do now? The players could play the characters from the TV show, and maybe they bring Buffy back. Or maybe the GM decides that Buffy's death does call another Slayer. Maybe there's a new Slayer. Or maybe they do bring Buffy back, but they bring her back in a different way. Point is, if you set it at the end of season 5, before the events of season 6 and 7, as far as I'm concerned, season 6 and 7 are up for grabs. You can follow slavishly along that line if you want, or not bother with it at all. It's open for grabs. The same is true if you set it earlier. I mean, if you set it after the events of season 3, where they finish high school and graduate. That gives you season 4 is a brand new thing. Maybe Buffy doesn't go to the local university. Maybe she goes to LA. Maybe that branches things out a bit. Maybe she deals more with Angel. Point is, it's up for grabs. Anything could happen. Anything could happen. And it allows for some real role-playing possibilities, which would be denied you if you had to stick slavishly to future canon. By all means, be held slavishly to the canon that exists up until the point your game starts. But you should never be held imprisoned by future canon. A couple of my players think that I'm disrespectful for that view. I disagree. I think it is perfectly valid in a role-playing game to ignore future canon. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Where do you stand on future canon?